Going live. We are live. All right. Welcome to Worldwide Slot Car Chat on Zoom number 190. The last one for 2023. As far as I know, there will be one next week because it's not on any special day. Today we're going to start our chat with the topic suggested by Mr. Rose of Car of 2023. And I'm going to twist his suggestion into your favorite car of 2023. It can be because you think it's the best performing car. You don't even have to own it. You could think that it's the best performing car, or you could believe that it's the best looking car, even if you don't have one. Whatever the reason, you like it the best out of the cars that came onto the market in 2023, from mass production to garage kits, whatever the situation. So if you would like to share your opinion on what is the coolest or best or whatever prettiest car for 2023, raise your virtual hand so that I don't miss you. And I'm going to make Jim go first because apparently nobody wants to chime in on this. All right, Mike raised his hand, but I want to hear from Jim. Go ahead, Jim.
Unfortunately, the reason I thought about it is I'm doing a video on it right now. So I can't tell you what it is because the video goes live on Friday.
Spoilers.
Spoiler. No spoiler.
Whatever.
So the car behind me is probably my favorite car of the year, the Thunderslot McLaren. I think it looks great. It's extremely fast, especially with a 25K motor in it. I've had really good success racing it. The only thing I don't like about it, Thunderslot, if it's a Ford, don't put Chevrolet valve covers on it. Other than that, I love the car. So that would be my car's favorite car of the year.
Gotcha.
But no spoiler alert for my video.
I don't think it'll make a difference on how many people view your video. They're gonna watch your video anyways.
Well, I nailed it down to the slotted Orca, the Revo Slot C5R, and the MR Slot Car Shadow. So those are the three finalists in my video.
Yeah. All right. Great options there. Mike had his hand up first. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, well, I can't pick just one.
Of course, that's fine.
From the cars of the year, from my standpoint, are first off the Orca, the slotted Orca, because of the performance compared to the other ones right out of the box. Importance, I think the Shadow is probably one of the better ones, even though it's not the best seller or best around. And the one I don't have that I want that I would like is the Porsche 963, but they haven't brought it out yet. The one I want, because I don't want to have to paint it. But I really am looking forward to getting the hypercars. I'm really excited about hypercar going with quite a large number of manufacturers in real life in 1.1 cars. So I think there's 8 or 9 companies that are coming out with them. So there should be lots of cars, and there are differences. They aren't quite as all the same as the Lolas and the rest of the LMPs are. There's distinctive portions of them. So it should be fun to get another class of those going, and I hope it doesn't take too long. Looks like a couple of the companies are coming out with them. So, but I'm really looking forward to those. So if I had to choose just one, I would say the Orca. I really like it a lot.
The hypercars are becoming popular and available enough. I believe they're including them in the 2024 Oxygen 24-hour competition as a class, basically. So yeah, good stuff. Cool cars. I'm still thinking about what mine is, but I'm going to let Dewan and then Don go ahead. Dewan.
Well, what should have been and would have been the car of the year for 2023 is the car that should have been car of the year of 2022, and most likely will be car of the year of 2024, which is the Worldwide Slot Car Chat Great Golf Special.
It is what it is.
So, with not being released in 2023, it can't be the car of the year for 2023. And so, with all that being said, my vote goes to the most anticipated car of the year, early on, and was well received and did not let anybody down as far as I'm concerned. Performance is still very good, and it's nothing but da 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 da.
Ah,
The Shadow Dude.
Shadow. Yeah, I figured that would be somebody's pick.
Yes, absolutely. It's just, and I just wish there were more cars in this class
Isn't that
available.
Can-Am?
It'll race
Well,
the Thunder Slots.
I was gonna. My last state was gonna be that was in the same competitiveness of
Oh,
this.
okay.
So I think that the Thunder Slots kind of outshine the performance of this car.
Depends on the track.
That's probably true. Yeah.
Okay, so that's
All right.
my
Good stuff, Dewan. What do you got, Don?
Well, I kind of agree with Dwan. I think it's the Shadow, and to be able to model it as well as they did and coming up with that new guide that they have on it, I think was a very significant advance in the slot car racing itself. So that's the one I pick. I think it's a beautiful car. I had it as HO, the original Aurora. I like buying the new cars that match my old HOs. So that's my pick.
All right. So 2 for the Shadow.
Wow, two for the savvy Canucks. How about that, huh?
And you can't deny that guide system is revolutionary. I don't know if they're going to use it on any car that doesn't require it. I mean, probably not. But are there any other cars that would require such a low profile guide? That
Yeah, technically, 70s Formula One cars, because the noses were quite low and pinched. So if you want to have the guide really far forward, that would work really well.
Oh, maybe that'll happen. Well, good pick either way, for whatever reason. My pick, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, is the BRM Bilstein Capri, because it is a fun car. It's a great performing car.
It's red and green.
It's the perfect combination. It's the perfect ratio of blue and yellow. The blue isn't too dark. I wouldn't mind if blue was just a hint lighter, but it looks great. And this is the car that helped me get a 4th place in Alan Smith's support race for the BRM Group 2 cars. So I certainly ain't going to complain about that.
It looks like it has a couple of marks on the roof there, Greg.
Yeah, crashes happen.
So you're really pushing it then. That's great.
I race my cars. No shelf queens in this house. But yeah, that would be my pick. I mean, I'm one of those guys that likes every car for what it is. I don't go taking a Scalextric and a Carrera and carving it up and replacing all the parts and or changing motors in pretty much anything. And the only time I change a motor is because our club rules require us, and it's usually to detune the motor. So every car has its own special place in my heart. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in my collection. So that's me. Anybody else? I don't see any other hands. I'm gonna put Don's hand down. Anybody else want to chime in on that? We can circle back on that later if you guys want to. But since nobody's jumping up and down and trying to get my attention, we'll go ahead and move on to show and tell. So if you have anything slot car related you want to show and tell, whether it's a project you're working on or a brand new car you just bought or track plans or poured resin or whatever the situation is, or holiday gifts that you might have just received, this would be a good time to go ahead and raise your hand so you can brag and rub our noses in it. John Weber had his hand right up. Go ahead, John.
Okay, I'm going to try something a little different, which is always dangerous. But last time I talked, Brian Gipprich asked about Alan Wilkerson's body mount post method. That I mentioned it, and he asked about it. And I went back and listened to what I said again, and it was pretty poor, poor description. So I thought I would try to do that again, but I did an Apple keynote, and I don't know if thing is going to work or not. So I'm going to try to share that screen.
Okay.
Can anybody see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Scratch bash.
Yeah, I'm just calling it Scratch Bash because it's you know, nothing is made. Almost nothing is made from scratch in this.
That's true.
You know, so it's not a kit bash either. So anyway, let me see if I can get this thing to play. Doink, if it'll hold up. Okay, is it still there?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. Then this is some better images of the Corvair Yenko Stinger body that I use this on. I'm going to use it on these Ferraris also, and some of the old Ferraris. Those are the pictures of the mount posts in the body. This is the chassis that I started with, or one like it, and had to shorten it to fit the Corvair wheelbase. But you can clearly see the body mount posts on the chassis. So those are what you work from. And these are what I call the raw materials, these bicycle spoke reflectors. I'm not sure if they're nylon or what kind of plastic they are. The outer covering comes off real easily, but I got mine from eBay, and the idea, I think it works really well. And then this is more or less the final product. Of course, the car's not finished, but the stance is what I'm looking for, the body position on the chassis. That's what I was looking for. And it really worked out well. I think we'll see how that goes. But then I also, let's see, let me stop that share. How did I do that? Not sure how to do that.
Want me to do it?
Yeah, if you can. Oh, I see. It was at the top. There's a button at the top.
John, can I ask a quick question? How flexible are those posts as far as creating potentially body float or movement within the body on the chassis?
Here's one of the posts, and let's see. Yeah, here's one of the posts, and it's pretty, it's pretty flexible. It's not breaking. That may be a semi-permanent problem right there with this one, but they're pretty flexible, and you can see roughly the length that they are. And like I said, about 3 inches. I think they're 85 millimeters or something like that long.
John, what did you use to glue them in?
Okay, so after I got a rough idea of how long they needed to be, of course I cut them to that length, and then used the body mount screws through the chassis and mounted the post to the chassis first. Then mated that to the body, test fit to the body test fitted several times, and then gradually cut the post down until I got about where I wanted. And use a vernier caliper, the tail end of the vernier caliper, and try to figure that out. Since I've figured that you could mount the post end sort of backwards or with a screw, and put the screw in backward and tighten it down to reduce the distance between the body and the chassis mount. see what I'm saying? You could put a screw in upside down from the way it would normally go, and then screw it in until you got where you wanted. Then you could measure that distance from the top of the screw to the body mount, the mount on the chassis.
Not the same, not the body mount screw, but a longer screw of some sort that holds into the chassis.
Theoretically, yeah. Then you could do it that way, but initially, once you figure that out, once you get the distance, as Alan suggested, what I did was super glued the post in position, and then to the body, and then screwed the body on to test fit it. The post didn't move after the super glue set, and then pull the body back off, and then epoxied all around the post to the resin body. This was one of my favorite tools to shorten the posts. This
file, yeah.
Little tiny file.
Oh, John,
really well.
John, I have a great idea for a t-shirt for you. My cars are small, but my tools are big.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And it's hard too. It's hard stuff. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Unless there are any other questions, I'll be happy to fumble around with them.
Just to make sure I got my head around it. Basically, you're getting those spoke reflectors because they're a good size for your typical body screws and body posts.
Right.
As far as, cross-sectional size. Then you're cutting lengths of them that you think will be pretty close, but probably cutting them long on purpose.
Yes.
To what the body posts need to be. And then you may either just guess and check and trim a little bit at a time until you get it perfect, or you might use a really long screw that goes into the chassis body screw hole from the top so that you can kind of adjust it by turning the screw down through the chassis and basically figure out the length of each post just by turning screws.
Yes.
And then you measure the height of where the top of the head of the screw is to get your length of each body post from.
Right.
Then
exactly.
you remove all those screws, and then you actually use the body screws to mount each post to the chassis. So you've got 3 or 4 or whatever number of posts sticking up from your chassis. And then you make sure that the body sits the way you want it to. And then when you're happy with that, you dab some glue on the top of each post and then put the body back down and let it cure.
Yes.
Just give it all the time
I
it
let
needs to
it cure
cure
overnight.
Especially if it's
but I let it cure overnight.
Especially if it's like the blue stuff.
Yeah.
And then you gently remove the body screw, the mounting screws for the chassis, so that it comes away and the posts are still glued to the body.
Yes.
And then you epoxy the bejesus out of outside the posts.
Yeah.
So
I would have rather
ready.
used like the more clear epoxy that you mix up this more of a gel when you get it done. But this, the JB Well worked okay, and so anyway, that's what I had on that at the moment.
And the less is more, I'm sure, with that kind of thing. As long as the post, the spoke reflector has a really good bond to the body. It doesn't have to be as tall as the post because the post is strong and flexible by itself and holds the body screw good enough by itself. You don't need to epoxy all the way up the post, right?
Right. Yeah. I didn't go all the way up the post. Something
you don't
else
want that
about
much. You don't want to put a whole bunch of epoxy way up high in the body and raise your center of gravity too much.
Right. Yeah. Especially JB Well. Let's see here. These are, if I can show these, if you can see these little bits in my palm, most of those little pieces are pieces that I cut and tried and ended up getting them too short. So I do it again.
Yep.
Posts are cheap. These things are cheap. So, and let me show you also, I don't know if you can make it out in this. Yeah, there it is. Okay, this post has a slot.
Yeah.
It has this X-shaped groove thing cut inside. I don't know if they're extruded or what into this X-shaped opening, but there's a slot, and that lets the post expand as you put the screw into it and tighten it up. It lets the post expand, and it keeps a nice tight screw. But if it wears out, it's not that big a deal, you know. If it gets a little loose, it's not that big a deal. So far, they haven't done that. Yeah. So, your explanation was much better than mine. But
I just put it all in less sentences. Right. I want to make sure I understood what was going on. Does anybody else have any questions for John on that method? All righty, thanks for sharing that, John, and thanks to Alan Wilkerson for sharing that a while ago.
Hope Brian gets to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Yeah, okay.
He was here earlier. Yeah, he's here.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, so thank you for that. And Luff, what you got today?
One of the guys in our hot rod club, he's got about 16 hot rods. He's been here a few times. One of the cars he's got is a Thames panel truck with a small block.
Cool.
So I'm trying to build a model of it. I don't know if it's showing up.
Yeah, hold it up a little higher. There you go. Maybe closer to your face. There you go.
I'm going to repaint it, so I've got the wheels. Got the wheels masked off. But that's pretty much exactly the car that he's got.
Is that a model or a 3D print?
It's a Revel model.
Okay.
The chassis is a slotted pod in a brass frame, and then a styrene base to mount it on the.
To mount it to the car, yeah.
Yeah, so that's it. I just in the process of repainting it, so that's why the wheels are masked up.
Yeah.
But it's a little rocket. It runs really well.
Yeah. Does he know you're doing that?
Sorry?
Does he know you're doing that, or is it a surprise?
He hasn't seen it, but he knows I'm doing it.
Oh, okay. That's awesome.
It's an amazing little model. So I'll let you know. The car, but... It's the red is too dark, so I got to repaint it. Anyway, that's it.
Cool looking model. Looking forward to seeing the finished product.
It runs really well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's one of your cars, right?
It runs better than my car.
Perfect. And then he'll be winning, and he'll want to keep playing, maybe. All right. Thanks for sharing that, Love. John Kitt, you're up next.
Well, I got to thank Dewan for this because, of course, you know, it was Christmas just a wee while ago, and I sort of talked to my wife about something I showed Dewan, and she went, "Oh, that's interesting," and look what ended up under the tree just for me.
Nice.
Yeah. So
is that readily available, or did she have to eBay it or something?
No. She actually went to our local hobby shop, and she says that just before Christmas, and that's what she picked up for me. So there you go.
Awesome.
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
And it has the figures with it.
Yeah. It has the figures, and you know, potentially all these things could be made to work, right? I mean, oh, it'd be awesome. So, but of course, it's 1/24th scale. But you know, I've got the 1/24th scale Batmobile, which I'm sure Dewan has as well, and they'd be great to do side by side. Now, here's a question though for folks who build. You know, I'm old, so when you built a 1/24th scale car in the old days, you'd use a 1/8 axle and not the 3/32, but you can use 3/32 axles on a 1/24th scale car, can't you?
Sure. Why not?
Okay. It's just a matter of getting, you know, wheels and tires and stuff. Although honestly, the tires aren't that bad. I mean, it's just meant to go around anyway. So, but yeah, it looks really nice. It's really well cast, and oh yeah, so I'm all excited. But there you go. That was my show and tell for Christmas.
Perfect.
I'd say she's a keeper.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, last year she got me the repop of the Revell 56 Caddy, and I was lamenting that, you know, the Caddy that I had didn't have the glass, because this one has the glass. So that was last year, and this year it's the Green Hornet. So yay!
Cool.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. And next up is Garth. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got a little update on my chassis that I showed last week. And you know, if you guys remember, if you don't, I'll tell you, I had screwed up because I sent the chassis file, the CAD file, to the printer, and I sent the wrong file. So I could assemble the chassis and work on it and race it without a body on it. And then this week I was sitting around, I was thinking, no, wait a minute, maybe I can figure out how to put a different body on there. And so what I ended up doing was I ended up, even though it was a F40 Ferrari, I ended up putting an old Lancia body on it. Okay. And I was able to, I had to do a few, a few little things to it. Like I had to cut out the wheel wells here and both in the front and the back. And then I had to do some wizardry in the underneath of it. And I'll show you to get the body to work. But I was able to make it work. And so now I got that chassis, you know, in a body that I can goof around with. And so I've been playing around with racing it around and adding weight here and there. And this is the original, how much it weighed. Okay. And let me see if I can get to the next one. There's the underneath of it. Okay. And you can see this is how I made it. It fit right into this. But in the back here, what I ended up having to do is, I don't know if you can see this real well, but this is a little piece of 1/8 inch aluminum that I cut out and screwed a hole into it to push it into the, to screw it into the Lancia body mount. And then I tapped a number 2 hole through the aluminum there and just used an M2 screw into it. And it worked, it worked well. It worked pretty good. So now I've got it mounted to a body, and that's what it looks like on the track. And I've been goofing around with the forward and rearward weight on it, okay, and came up with a couple of interesting things. But it's really, really nice, okay. And if I can kind of describe how it's almost like it's too light, okay. It's definitely too light in the front end. Okay. And so I've been goofing around with the formula of the 60 in the back and 40 in the front. And interesting enough, the first crack at it, okay, I had no lead in the back of the chassis and some lead in the front of the chassis. And I came up with a 64-36, okay. 64% weight in the back, 36 in the front. Okay. And that worked really well. Okay. And surprisingly well, because it's sort of outside of the formula a little bit. And so I talked to Maurer about it. Maurer said, try to add another 2 grams in the front. So I did that. Okay. And see if it would actually change the characteristics of the car. And I did that, and I got it down to 62-38. Okay. But here's the interesting thing to me, and maybe somebody can kind of chime in on that. Even though I like the lighter version of it, okay, because the car drives through corners and out of corners with less tail wag with the 64-36 against the 62-38. And so I was kind of perplexed by that. Okay. But in general, the car is so light that it's, and you keep in mind that it's got, the only weight in it is some lead in the front end, and it's got 3D printed nylon wheels, 3D printed chassis / motor pod, 3D printed guide. So it's all 3D printed. The only thing that's not 3D printed is the body. Okay. And so anyways, that's
and the motor and gears.
And the motor and gears, obviously, the motor and
the aluminum chassis mount extension.
Hey, and the little aluminum chassis mount. And also, Dennis, one other thing is that car has an aluminum wing on it. Okay. So it's missing the interior of it. I mean, that car, that old Lancia is the very first 132nd car I ever owned. Okay. And so it's, I don't know, 12 or 13 years old. And I mean, it's been through the, it's been 27 different colors, and it's got, 8 tons of epoxy on it and everything. But I was really happy to be able to put it onto a chassis, onto that chassis. It allows me to test the car with the body on it. So that's all I got.
And that was the chassis that didn't have all the latest advancements.
Yeah, that was prototype 1. I don't have prototype 2 yet, but I'll soon have that. Okay. And interestingly enough, once I perfect prototype 2 or 3 or whatever it ends up being, that's the on the slot.it / Polycar F40. Okay. The very next chassis I want to try to make that design fit into is the Lancia LC2. So, I'm learning a lot about how the body and the weight of that.
Should probably get a fresh body.
Well, there's one other thing I mentioned. I was telling my wife about this. When you look at what it cost me, okay, to create wheels, to get the wheels, the guide, and the chassis printed, okay, against buying them, okay. If I bought the parts, okay, and I'm going to include aluminum wheels in there. It's under $10. Okay, so I can produce a car without a body for under $10. Okay, and against about, I think I added it up and it was about $50 for other, for parts that I would have to buy. And not only that, but a lot lighter car. Okay. And, but in general, it's I mean, this is the first go around with the body on it. And, it's pretty damn nice, man. It really is not, it drives really nice, and it goes in and out of corners really nice, and with very little tail wag. Okay. And, so I'm very encouraged by it. Okay.
Yeah, looking forward to the next prototype results. All right, thanks for sharing that, Garth. And I'm gonna do my share real quick because it'll only take a moment. And apparently I forgot to change tabs again. Okay. So I finally made my own. The one that was mine was an early prototype. So I finally got around to updating my version with the latest parts and stuff. And of course, it had to be blue and yellow. And on a related but different note, I'll let you guys, savor the beauty of this tire machine. One person who was using one of the tire grinders was using it vigorously, I'll say, and he was loving it. And he was using it so vigorously and loving it so much that the tire dust buildup that he was too busy using the machine to clean off managed to get into the bearings of the sanding spindle. And the bearings I've been including are open race bearings, not sealed bearings, because they spin better. So from now on, I'm including sealed bearings with the machine, and a gentle reminder that when you're doing your tires, go ahead and vacuum off or dust off or whatever the dust. Don't let it build up so much that it gets in the bearings. So if you have an older version from me, or you made your own and bought the bearings off of the link that I shared, just keep that in mind. If you think you're prone to lazily leaving tire dust all over your machine while you use it, then get yourself some sealed bearings to have on hand to replace the bearings with. Otherwise, that's the only person who's reported anything like that. But better safe than sorry. Sealed bearings from now on.
And just remember, there's a difference between a shielded bearing and a sealed bearing.
That's fair. So shielded at least, sealed
preferably.
I got shielded for most of them, but I did get a pack of sealed and
yeah, the seals are worth it in there because it's difficult to get at them, take them out. The problem with a shielded bearing, an open bearing will allow the dirt in, but it also allows the dirt out. And shielded bearing, once it gets in there, it's difficult to get it out.
At least not without removing the shield, which is a pain in the butt most of the time. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. That is well noted. Of course, the JNS tire grinder is still available through me, or make your own, or call up Alan at 132slotcar.us and buy one through him. That's all for me. And Big Den has his hand up. Go ahead, Big Den.
Good morning, fellas, or afternoon, or with Thursday or Friday, or wherever, what side of the international date line you happen to be on. Wednesday for you, I think. I wish people like Jim wouldn't throw these questions without notice, such as slot car of the year. I can't remember back past the last one I bought a couple of weeks ago, so I'll have to have a bit of a poll through the box and check out and maybe advise next time. But just for the showing and telling, just a quick few slides today, and I'll find the share screen. You can be Bob there. And should be coming up. There we go there. See some motors?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I've got the Predator 20.5K motor has recently become available at one of the dealers in Australia. So I thought I'd grab a few of them just to try and tone down some of the cars. The advanced slot cars I've got come with that orange motor, which is about 23,000 revs, I think, and depending on what voltage they rate them at, and notorious for not having much braking power. So I thought I'd try these, and they're about $10 cheaper a piece than buying the NSR or other brand equivalent long cans. So that's something time will tell. And I actually got some steel pinions to go with them too, so Chris will be happy with me. Next one, just for Paul, who's not on the chat today, I don't think, but I grabbed out my Nichimo Corvette body just to show what the front grille probably should look like. This was, I think he was missing the grille from what he's told us last week. So hopefully he'll watch it on playback and get a look at that. And the last one just relates to what you guys were discussing as topic of the week last week, about our race format. So I just made a little table of what we do at our local track. Race details come up on the Facebook page 3 or 4 days. Race entry fee, and a slide dig at John Kitt there. So racing food and soft drinks is covered in that. If you want alcoholic drinks, you can buy that at extra cost, which is fair enough. In all honesty, most of us have got a little bit of distance to travel to get home, so we drink in moderation. I like a drink as much as the next man, especially if the next man's Dean Martin. But I do refrain and only have 2 or 3 for the night of medium strength beers, and our food for the night can vary just from pizzas and small savouries and party pies and things like that. So that's about all I've got in the share and show and tell business. So I'll stop that, and I may well return for Club Corner later on.
All right. Thanks for circling back on a variety of topics there and adding your points. Okay, Dennis, you ready?
Yep, I am. Hi, guys. So I was a little late today, but I'm here. Let me start a screen share. You guys, the guys that are on Facebook have probably seen some of these already. I've been working this week on a new project. This is what it looks like from the outside. From the inside, it's a whole lot more interesting. Here's the full kit and caboodle. KC Racing 3200 kV brushless motor being driven by an SBM board. That's the board that comes from Richard Mack and Bob Budge in the UK. I put it onto a CG Slot Cars carbon fiber 3D printer or fiber infused or whatever Matt does with those things. Chassis that he gave me about 4 years or 5 years ago that I've never used, and so I put this car together this way with one of his of the CG Slot Cars motor mount pods as well, and to give it a try. And it ran. I geared it as high as I could because I knew that, or as low as I could, should I say, because I knew that it's a very high revving RPM. It was going to be a high revving motor, being 3200 kV. Even at 10 volts, that would be the equivalent of 32,000 RPM free running, which is a little more than we normally run in our cars. Overall, Wayne, this car is 16 grams lighter than the standard slotted 911 GT1 Evo that has the flat 6 motor in it. So it is super, super light. As a result of that, it is a very different drive to what we're normally used to. With all that power and not having any weight to it. Turns out it's pretty good in the turns. I didn't have any major problems getting it around the track. The best times I can get right now on my track would be with something like a slotted Mazda LMP or a Lola LMP with a 25K flat 6 in it, and G25 tires on the back. I can run around a 5.4 lap time quite reasonably comfortably, pushing it hard. This runs a 5.6 without too much trouble, and I haven't gotten any further with anything else like wider tires or more weight or any other kind of tuning. It's basically just from putting it together, doing some setup, making sure that the front end was working the way that I needed the front end to work. So the chances are, guys, that we're going to see more and more brushless motors in 132nd scale cars. I have a 2000 kV motor coming, which I will pop into this car as soon as I get it. It's coming from Germany, and I will be able to feed back some information about that later on too. But it's fun, and it's fun.
How are the brakes, Dennis?
Yeah, the brakes are fine. No problem. What I do find with the brakes is that if you, for example, if you're driving around and you come down a straightaway and you stop in front of you, you can see that the brakes apply, and then right at the end, just before the car stops, it kind of coasts a little. So it's almost like as the RPM of the motor gets really low, the brakes go away. But that may well be that there's just no longer enough power to control the board or something like that. And it's a little more noticeable with the SBM board, this board, than it is with the Westrock board. Those are the only two that I have any experience with so far. But yeah, it's got more than enough brakes. So I've had to turn on a light car like this. I've had to actually turn the brakes down on the controller. I'm not running full brake at all. Which controller were you using? I tried 2 or 3 different ones. I tried a Carstein CS 4.2, and I tried a DeFalco, and I tried my old trusty Professor Moto diode controller. And all of them work fine, and some have more adjustments than others. On my particular track, where I'm only running 10.5 volts, believe it or not, the old Professor Motor diode controller felt the best. But I think on any other track where I've got higher voltages, then the extra chokes and other adjustments that are available on something like the Karstein are going to be very useful.
So you didn't use it with or try with the true speed,
With the true speed, I haven't tried it yet because everywhere, the little bit that I've read says that some of these boards are not particularly, they don't function very well when they're driven by a PWM controller. But I have not tried it yet. I will try it at some point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So yeah, guys, that's where it is, and it's fun. I made up this little aluminum. You can see there's a little aluminum plate in between the motor and the pod. That's just a little circular plate. You can see it in the previous photo. Hold on a minute. Let me just get this thing out of the way.
Dennis, is the angle that we see for expedience of mount, or were you trying to get it to angle like that?
No, the angle is because this particular motor pod is manufactured with that angle in it.
Okay.
It's the CG motor pod that goes with their chassis kits for the Scalex and SCX Trans Am cars. That's the motor pod that I used. I had a couple spare, and I thought, well, I'm not going to put a slotted motor pod into a CG slot car's chassis. I might as well use a CG slot car's motor pod if I'm going to do it. So that's the only reason, John.
Okay, so it's effectively a sidewinder.
It's basically a sidewinder, and if it had been in a slotted pod, it would have been a full sidewinder, and there's obviously plenty space to do it. Both of this pod and the slotted pods are worked out for an 18mm gear and a 6.5mm pinion. The only problem with that is that you start to be limited on gear ratio. So what I did here was use a 19mm diameter gear with 36 teeth and a 5.5mm 9-tooth pinion so that I could get a 4-to-1 ratio. And I might even try it at some stage with an 8-tooth pinion and see what that does.
So why the aluminum plate there? So
because the pitch on the screws in the motor is 9mm across the screws, and in the pods are all 12mm, so or 12.25 or whatever it is. So I actually just made it up so that I could screw it directly into a regular pod without having to drill the pods any different. So basically what I've done with that little plate is just to convert from the 9mm pitch on the mounting screws of the brushless motor to the same pitch of the screws on all of our regular motors.
So this means that, for any
I could take this motor out and screw it into any other pod.
Well, what I mean is that if I want to basically fix this motor on any of our pod, there is a need of having something like that.
Correct.
Okay.
Or having to re-drill the pod.
And eventually, I'm sure there will be pods, brushless motor pods with.
No doubt, I'm sure that's coming.
I mean, how many?
The other thing too about putting an adapter plate there, and Wayne will like this, is it moves the motor more, at least 2mm closer to the center of the car.
Yeah. Because those pods are kind of wasting a lot of. They're not done for these motors, and I think there is a much better way in which we can accommodate the motors.
Of course, yes, for sure.
Is this the original motor you started with, or the newer, slower one?
This is the newer, slower one. I have three of these motors. This one is a 3,200 kV. Then I have a 4,500 that I have in the 1/24 scale flexi car that I've shown before. And then I have a 6500, which is in a Eurosport Formula One car at the moment, which is a whole new ball game to drive. And that's commercial tracks only, and super speed. The casting controller works very well on that. I've had to turn in a lot of choke and so on, but the car actually drives really nice.
Dennis, did you run this on Electric Dreams, the big track?
I will run it tomorrow. I haven't been there since I built the car. So tomorrow it will get its run.
So that was on your home track?
Yeah, that was on my home track. And my home track is much shorter. The straights are only 10 feet, 12 feet long. So you have, and the turns are a lot tighter. So it'll be interesting to see what it does, particularly being so light on the Electric Dreams track. I will tell you all next week. All right.
Wayne and Gio are having a little discussion. Speaking of chat things, somebody on YouTube wanted me to ask Mr. Rose, says, can you please ask Jim Rose about the axle tubes he puts on his rear axles, and if the inside of the tube is 3/32 exactly or slightly larger?
Dennis is shaking his head. I don't remember right offhand. Do you remember, Dennis? It's the tube that goes on the inside of the bushing.
Not the
pretty close.
Not the Slotic Plus ones that.
No, the home. Are they referring to the homemade ones or the Slotting Plus?
He didn't say one way or the other, but I'm guessing the homemade ones.
Well, and the homemade ones will be 332 aluminum tubing, and that is just a very slight. Hang on, no.
Remember?
How do they fit? Do they fit over the bushings?
No, inside what would technically be not really the inner race, but that recess in the bushing. It's a press fit. And
okay.
The tubing I had was really close, so I had to sand off the outside of the tubing to get it to fit so it didn't bind, because you don't want it to bind in there. And then once I get it in there so it fits snug without binding, then I glue it together.
Okay, if it fits snug inside the relief of an NSR bushing,
yeah, exactly,
then it's definitely going to be bigger than 332s on the inside.
Yeah, and offhand I don't recall what size it is.
I would think that probably you had a piece of 3/16 or so tubing on the outside, which means that it's a 32nd of an inch smaller on the inside.
All right. Well, maybe we'll get a specific thing later.
The easiest thing to do if somebody's online and wants to build one is just take your bushing down to the hobby shop and test fit them.
Yeah. go to the metal tube section and.
Yeah, or if you do like I do, put the bushing in a little plastic bag where you never find the bushing in your pocket, and then take it out.
Because it'll find any hole in your pocket.
Wise man.
All right. So thank you for the answer on that one, gentlemen. And it looks like we're ready to move on to Mr. Ed.
Yeah, I talked to David or exchanged some emails with him, and he's going to do a bunch of videos this week of his autonomous approach, which is sort of it's a self-learning and control approach to autonomous that uses a bunch of IR sensors that are wireless around the track. And so hopefully on a late call like this one, so not next week, maybe the week after, he'll be prepared to kind of share some of that.
Cool. And
then I spent a short 5 hours with Dr. C on the phone or doing Skype the other day, and we covered a lot of the old scale electric stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of what was going on there. So I kind of created a bunch of little charts, so I'll see if they don't clean up. but anyway, we'll do
simple
autonomous.
charts this time, Ed. Simple, small charts this time.
Well, I don't even think I'll show them unless something comes up that want to discuss. I think seeing David's approach will be interesting for people because I think it's going to be more like what you kind of alluded to, but not using wheel spin and gyro stuff or whatever. It's a sensing location around the track similar to sort of what Scorpius can do, but he's built a very interesting approach where it learns, and he's an old software programmer. Matter of fact, he's doing this in a form of Pascal, and Pascal isn't used very much anymore these days. But he's and he's done a neat deal, and he has these really nice user displays that are like an F1 wheel with all the gauges, and he's kind of taken an interesting approach. He's only been screwing around with it for 4 years. So it's been going on for a while, and he was having trouble. He actually started off with infrared controllers and trying to use that thing, but he got messed up with the protocol that goes into the CU. So that's where we hooked up, and so he's got, I think he said he had 4 cars running pretty good, but keeping them clustered where they're more competitive to each other is something he needs to solve. But I think in order for him to get this to work well, if you go just a hair deeper, he has a multi CPU core processor, and he's doing all this real-time things threaded out to the different CPUs to keep this thing running well, because to try to do that timing with a real operating system in Pascal is no small feat. So he's done some good stuff.
Cool. Looking forward to seeing
so that should be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, sir. And Courtney, what would you like to share?
A friend of mine has been working on a project for me. This is a 1/18th scale RC car body. And he custom built a brass chassis for me with a Super 16D. And I have a video of it running without the body painted. Hopefully I go to the track in the next week and I'll do a video. But it runs with an FCR car, maybe a little faster. But it's,
That's big. Yeah. Well, twice the size, pretty much, right?
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, no, hey, it's a nominal 1/24th scale.
Well, this would be the Canadian dollar of slot cars. Because you need so many of them. Did you guys ever see the video? There was a video on YouTube a long time ago about a 12 scale RC car. That thing, I saw that and I go, man, is that
12
cool?
scale slot car on a big ass oval. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what prompted my.
Yeah. That's a beautiful chassis. Who built it?
I'll give you one guess, and his initials are Pablo.
Oh, okay.
Every other lane?
Well, we don't have any rules for it, and I'm the only one that has one, so I get to pick whatever lane I want.
Yeah.
But anyhow, that's all I got.
That's cool.
That is
love
cool.
it.
Yeah. All right.
Now what you got to do is put a brushless motor in that thing. Get rid of that lump of 16G.
He's waiting for the dust to settle on that, I think.
Yeah, just like the Canadian dollar, there's a lot of airspace in there.
All right. Any other show and tellers before we move on? All right. Let's do Club Corner. If you have any past, present, or future racing you want to talk about, now's the time to raise your hand so I make sure to call on you. Otherwise, we'll open the floor and just chit-chat for the next hour. I think Big Den was going to do something. Did he disappear for a moment?
No, he's still there.
He's still there. Hey, Big Den, you want to do some Club Corner?
He went for a drink with a cocktail or something.
He went for a drink. He went for a drink with the other man
at additional cost. I think someone also included Oliver Reed in Oliver Reed in that category. I like a drink as much as the next man. Yeah, especially if it's Oliver Reed. Yeah. Okay then. Yeah, we finished up our racing for 2023 back on December the 7th or the 8th. So we're hoping to get going again January the 5th. So I just got some pictures of what happened on that night. And oops, I better not share that one because it's the wrong one.
Yeah, she might get upset.
Right, so back to Zoom and share screen and share that one. I can still see my mouse pointer. Okay, so we started off with under 2 litre Revo sedans. I was a bit late, so I didn't make the grid on that one. But 5 raced there, and Dave got back to our host got back to his normal winning ways, and quite a comfortable win there, as you can see. Fairly close for the next 3. On to DTMs, and I actually was there in time to race in this one. And you'll see by the results, I didn't shine until the last heat, and that was because I spent a fair bit of time fiddling around trying to get my DS controller working right and tuned in right. My old Professor motor thing, I think it's got dead spots down low, and it's become frustrating. So I've finally made the move that I'm going to be running with the DS full time now. So as I said, but once I got my act together, 28 laps was pretty good for the DTM class. Father Peter just beat his son by a lap in that one. So he had a good night, Peter, because as you'll see in the next race, the winning car is Peter. Dave second. They both had the same lap score. I ran my new Revo little Porsche GT2, the Mizuno colour scheme, the blue and white one, and for a first run, it had never been on the track before. I just trued the tyres and did what I thought was a bit of tuning, and I was within 2 laps of the lead. So, and as you'll see from, there's another picture here I want to share, but I don't know why it's.
I was going to ask something about this picture anyway.
Yeah, okay. Were you going to ask why there was 7 in it?
No, I was going to
7
ask
cars? Oh.
whether it's just a photo or whether those cadets are actually bigger than the alphas. Because
just a minute.
It looks really big.
Yeah, at least for the EMSA Group 2s, the cadets alphas are teeny.
Yeah, I can see what you mean there. Yeah, it's
the alphas are super small. It's crazy how small they are.
Yeah,
but
and I thought,
an Opel Cadet was not a big car, right?
Yeah, maybe it's the wing on the back of it that makes it look bigger.
Yeah,
Dennis.
Yeah,
on that.
I just haven't seen one in the flesh. I just wondered about that.
Oh,
Dennis, I put them side by side.
Yeah,
and it seems to be an optical illusion because the Opel Cadet is no taller than, I don't have an Alpha, but it's no taller than the Escort. But
Okay.
It looks taller in pictures.
Is there a difference between the body sizes of the original GTA that Revo came out with and the GTA-N?
No,
Okay.
I think so.
Right, so there's my share. Don't know how, but Dave forgot to take a picture of the results, so I could remember the first 4 scores, but unfortunately for Leon and Jared, not the last 2. But so a pretty good year all in all for our group. You know, we're starting to just slowly increase in the numbers. We do get a couple of guys who don't race on Friday nights because they have a work schedule that sees them want to put their feet up or pick their glass up on a Friday night. So there are a couple of guys that we would normally see on our Sunday meets, so we can look forward to probably having 8 or 9 maybe on our Saturday meets in the new year. So we'll watch this space. So that's it, and I've enjoyed sharing with you guys, and enjoyed having a regular venue. Of course, I also head down to Phil's end of the island from time to time and partake of the conviviality down there and the friendship. So it's been a reasonably good year for me, and that'll do me.
Yeah, it's been a good year. It's just in general for slot car racing, as far as I'm concerned. Been having a lot of fun with the guys. We didn't race Monday for obvious reasons, but we're going to race on this coming Monday. And the last time we raced, I think it was at Rogers. I didn't do any video. Russ might post video. I think he was taking some video. But I didn't lose, not last. And even if I did, it wouldn't have mattered because I would have been having fun doing it. So yeah, no big deal. All right, Jeremy, you put your hand up. Are you going to talk some club stuff, or are you getting ready for open floor?
I have some club stuff.
Do it.
So if you're in central Iowa, which I assume many of you are on a regular basis, if you're near the Newton Speedway in Sully, Iowa, there's a place called Fast Trax Motorsports. Stop in this Saturday, 9 a.m. We're racing 9 a.m. to probably 3 p.m. So if you're out and about, stop in.
Nice.
Just minutes from the highway. Well, the only major highway, Interstate 80. So.
Nice looking circuit.
Yeah, it's not too bad. They prefer to race with rubber tires out there. But on this event, they'll let silicones in, and I still think the rubber tires will dominate, though. But we'll see how it goes.
Is that turn at the far end? Is it actually banked a little?
Yeah, there's a bank it starts to bend right about here, and it banks into here, and then the camber comes back to normal over here. So this whole section here is banked.
Oh, cool.
A slightly, I mean, it's not very much, but it's enough that you can power through it. Yeah, you can carry your speed all the way through there.
Yeah.
Very nice looking track.
I do like that track, yeah.
How big is it in length?
I don't know the length. I'll get that from them next time. I don't know offhand. The only bad thing is that the grass here, he put down flock, that like dusty grass stuff. And then they thought just spraying it with a spray bottle would work, but it doesn't. Like if your car wipes out and goes through the grass, you are done for the day, or at least for that race, so you can clean your tires.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's at least 20 feet from tip to tip of the.
That's a nice looking track.
Yeah, that's the only track we have in the club that's at a actual professional business, so there's a little more room. He sells parts there, and I don't know, not too shabby.
What was the name of it again?
Fast Trax Motorsports, Sully, Iowa.
Fast Trax?
Yep, it's he sells like Suzuki's and Yamahas, ATVs, but he owns the building next door, so he uses this for a slot car track, and like in the front of the building is like a lawyer's office, but the back here is where he put his slot car stuff. So.
Nice.
Where's the nearest airport?
I would say Newton Speedway. Like a lot of the race car drivers fly into Newton, and then you're like 20 minutes away.
What are you racing? What class of cars?
Well, if you're gonna show up, just show up, and they'll have loaner cars there. But we race all of the Iowa model racers cars. So there's I think there's 9 classes, but we'll probably only run like 7 of those classes.
We'll pick you up on the way.
Okay.
Private jet's coming.
Dewan's flying everybody out. That's nice, Dewan. You're such a good guy.
Yeah.
What are Iowa
Fast Trax with an X?
What's that?
What are the kind of cars again?
Well, Iowa model automotive racers. We have a website. If you go to imar.club, it's usually like we have a scale electric stock car, a vintage Ninco class, slotted classics, NSR, F1. Okay. I mean, we try to look at like the clubs that a lot of you guys do. Like we'll look at NorCal's rules and say, oh, they're racing NSRs with the other brand, and why don't we look at doing something like that? And instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, it's just easier to follow what other people have found successful.
Yeah. For some reason, my brain was thinking, oh, some kind of cottage car manufacturer just in his own area. What?
That would be awesome, but no.
No, that makes sense. Okay. All right, good stuff. So anybody else want to do Club Corner stuff? Otherwise, we'll just open the floor. Anything slot car related? Ask, tell, whatever.
Well, I have something if nobody else has anything.
Do it.
Let me pull this up here. Oh. Okay, another share here, and so I finally have a Carrera guide up for sale on our website. So we've got it. I mean, basically, we got it back from the printers, and everything looks good. Everything, all the dimensions fit. So that's the only. I was going to show that earlier in news, but I didn't think it was that interesting. So anyway, Carrera guides now that we've kind of dipped our toe into that area. That's it.
Yeah, I saw you do a video kind of explaining, decisions and why and benefits and stuff like that. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, oh, thank you. I get a lot of questions that people ask, why do I need this guide? And I was like, well, you don't really need the guide. This is for like guys who don't want to cut their chassis apart, and like not everybody has done a Samson level of expertise. Some of us are like me, who are just a big dummy, and I don't want to shave it, and I don't want to go buy. I don't want to take my stick to the brass rod section and figure out, oh, this is the one I need, and then come and try to grind it out. I just can't do it. So these are for guys who just want to put it in and go, and then you're done.
Did you link to that video on the page?
Yeah, if you go to our website, jadedparts.com, and look on the Carrera Deep Guide, I'm just gonna start putting my videos. If it's about that Carrera guide, I'll put it on the page so people can look at it and then kind of figure out why we did this design. Because there's always somebody who gives me input and says you should have done it this way, and I'm like, I know, I can't do it every way. So
is his name Garth?
No, Garth gives me good input.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest if you weren't already doing it, because I think that's a great idea. So, yep, GMTA. All right, anybody else want to talk thoughts?
I'm surprised Garth didn't get a CUDA for Christmas.
Yeah, Garth. All right.
Yeah, real Joe Cool there, just drinking his coffee.
I'm not sure because my memory is terrible, but Mr. Wallace, have you been on before? John would have said one way or the other if he remembered.
Oh,
you had it unmuted.
No, first time.
Oh, do you want to do a Tony Wallace slot car history like everybody else, or just not? You don't have to.
No, I'm just curious. This is my first time.
Okay, we'll let you just sit there in silence and peace then.
Thank you.
Okay.
But right, I love your chair though. Love the chair.
Yeah, racing chair. Comfy.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else got anything they want to ask or talk about? I'm going to go check YouTube, see if anybody else has any questions over there.
Brian has his hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question in regards to ride height. Playing with chassis over the last couple of weeks, ride height's something I look at, and a lot of times I'm not exactly sure. Obviously, as low as you can go is desirable. Understand that. Lower center of gravity, better. But there are often instances where I'm as low as I can go, but I'm not necessarily flat. In other words, the back end might be a little higher than the front end, or vice versa. Typically, it's vice versa, because I can get the back end dragging, but obviously there's restrictions to the front with guides and braids and so forth. Is one preferable, if you can't get it flat, is one preferable to the other, or is there any downside to having, the back end a little lower than the front end? Is that preferable to the front end being lower than the back end, or is it all kind of a moot point?
Aerodynamically.
Okay, I'm going to assume it's a moot point.
It's
because everybody's moving.
I mean, I got nothing. I was waiting for Dennis to chime in.
Jim will probably chime in too.
Okay.
Number one, it depends on what the rules are. If you're racing somewhere, what kind of clearance you have, and where they measure it. Number two, you want as little clearance as you can get away with everywhere. Number three, if you are going to have a difference between front and rear, you want the front lower than the back.
So that's preferable, if possible.
Yeah, always, yeah. And that's I can't think of much more.
So the one thing I'm going to chime in, I have had a couple cars with reverse rake just to get some of the traction off the back of it and get some bite off the corner. However, I sand down every guide that I have to try to get the front lower. I don't understand why I can't, why they don't raise the mounting point for the for the guide. Because I agree. That's how we run the big cars, the front end drags. And I don't necessarily want it to drag, but I would like it to be lower. So I know I sand every guide flag I have.
That what Wayne's saying in the comments is pertinent. You got to watch if you have a rake on the chassis and the back is higher than the front. You got to watch that the braids are still relatively parallel to the track. You don't want the front end of the guide digging in, right? So
right,
even if you do have the back higher than the front, then you need to have some kind of adjustment or compensation on the guide so that the guide is, if nothing, at least parallel to the track.
Yeah, I had some issues with that on some of the chassis where it was actually riding on the very front of the braid,
not a good
as opposed to the trailing edge of the braid. So in my later designs, I've actually raised, like Courtney said, I've got the guide up into the chassis. So when my guide's mounted to my chassis without braid on it, it is actually higher up than the bottom of the chassis. So I've tried to deal with that situation, just like Courtney mentioned. And actually, I thought about it, Dennis, because it's something you had mentioned in the past about like a 2-degree rake, maybe on the post.
Yeah.
To try and get that nose up a little bit, and I think might help. Again, typically I'm not grinding tires and things like that for height. The last one I've been playing with, and I've actually been focusing, I found over the last few weeks playing with these, and I did some different styles. I did, a typical 4 screw pod. That's okay. I just tightened up the holes to clean up the slot. Then I went to the tripod one where I used 3 screws instead of 4. And to be honest with you, what I seem to be liking the best, and I don't know, Dennis, I don't think you were here last week. I did one, I called it a monopod, or it only uses 1 screw. And what it is there's pins out the back of the pod that the chassis actually rides on the top of. So your ride height in the back never changes. It doesn't matter how loose you run the pod, it never changes. So that's made things a little easier for me. Because then I can adjust ride height either with tire size or offset in the pod. But loosening pod screws doesn't change my ride height, because that was something I was running into before. I'm trying to run low, and then I end up loosening up the pod screws, and all of a sudden the back end's way lower than the front end. So I've been focusing more on this chassis with very good results, actually. I got to run wires with that one, I think. See, with the 3-pod chassis, even with the wired suspension, if you decided you didn't like the wires, you could just pull the wires out, and it's a regular 3-screw podded chassis. No harm, no foul. But with this, running the wires, it works really well because the wires actually support. I set the wires almost to neutral tension, so the pod is actually forced up to the top of the chassis. So there's no play there. If I pick up the car, the pod is flush with the chassis. Plenty of movement side to side, but again, no play with the ride height. So that's, I think, is going to help because I don't have to worry about my pod screws changing my rear ride height. So all of a sudden I went from level to having a negative rake or vice versa. So I was just curious. Most of my cars, I would say, and again, I haven't messed with offsets a whole lot or varying tire sizes, tend to have, if they're not level, tend to have a bit of a negative rake. They tend to run a little lower in the back than the front. Not a ton, but a little. So far, I can't say that it's necessarily been an issue. I have found sometimes if I've got too much front rake or a little too much low in the front, when I'm testing the chassis, by the time I throw a body on it, now the front end of my body's rubbing on the track because it extends beyond the end of the chassis. So it's all, I got to take that all into consideration when I'm tuning these. and the other thing, and I guess I never thought about this as much in respect is wheel size as part of your gearing equation. Typically most of the stuff I've been doing lately, except for a sidewinder, Garth gave me some help with here I'm working on. I run inline. Inline's easy. I don't have to worry about gears rubbing on tracks with low tires and so forth. And I did one with a 25K Predator in it, inline. And I had 16.8 wheels on it from Professor Motor, 16.8 or 16.9s with a almost 11 millimeter wide tire on it. Great. Accelerated like a beast, but had no freaking brakes whatsoever. I have another car, identical chassis, running a Piranha motor with 15.8 plastic slotted wheels on it and the same tire. And significantly better brakes. The car is smooth as butter, and it's almost silly how smooth it is. So I said, what the heck? Let me try this. I went 15.8 plastics on with the Predator. Again, brakes aren't as good as the Piranha, but it was significantly better, and the car handled, I think, was a little more predictable. So again, that's something I guess I got to kind of think with that, because if I'm using tire height to manage my ride height in the back, I have to figure that into the gear ratio as well. Or am I overthinking this?
It depends what you're doing. If you're racing against Jim Rose and a bunch of guys like him, you've got to think about the rollout and overall gearing all the time. If you're running at home, you basically do, create something that works for you.
Well, if I'm racing against Jim Rose and those guys, I figure I'm coming in last anyways. I guess that wouldn't bother me.
Yeah, I mean, we do.
I understand.
Obviously, we do look at rollout because as you go smaller and smaller on the overall size of the rear wheels or the rear wheel and tire assembly, in order to get the back of the car as low as you can, you want to change the gearing so that you get the speed back. Because as soon as the tire diameter is smaller, you've lost a lot of top end. You might gain a little bit of acceleration, but you're losing the top end. So the very first thing you've got to do is either go to a bigger pinion or a smaller crown or spur gear in order to get that back. And that's all what's called rollout.
So Brian,
and I understand that. So what I did in that, after that little experiment, is I mic'd the tires, and there was about a millimeter difference in the size using the two different rims. Makes sense. 15.8 rim, 16.9 rim, same tire. So I just did another pod with a 1 millimeter offset, and the car handles much better. It still doesn't have the greater brakes.
Get the handling back. You may not get the brakes back, but you'll get the handling back.
Exactly. And the brakes are manageable. You just, after running that other car that's so smooth and I can drive so deep into a corner, this one you just got to adjust your braking points. Because the thing is wickedly fast. A 25K Predator running 927 gears, especially on a track that's got like a 14-foot straightaway, it's plenty of motor. But the other thought on that, and I mentioned Garth was helping me with a Sidewinder. Why, for example, on an inline, 927 is kind of the standard, if you will, the 3.0 ratio. Why is it on Sidewinder gears they tend to run more like 31 or 32 11s? Is it simply because the size of gear they have to use, that they have to change the number of teeth? I mean, why not a 927 on a Sidewinder?
I don't know that there's a good answer to that.
Dennis is right, but it may be that 927 is not going to create a good mesh on a Sidewinder, and it does on a inline with a crown. I'm not sure if that's the absolute reason.
The only thing I came up in my brain is I remember Chris Walker talking about, he said, if you want to find the I guess he called it the ideal number of teeth for a given gear, multiply the diameter of the gear by double the the gear diameter by 2 and then subtract 2. So an 18 millimeter gear would be 36 minus 2. A 34 tooth gear in that size would be the ideal mesh, if I remember him saying that correctly.
Something
so I was
like
wondering
that,
if
yeah.
maybe that was part of the reason they use that many teeth. It's because, but then I see some of the manufacturers are using a 16.5 millimeter spur.
I'm always using the shorter spur gear to get so I can get the ground clearance without the spur gear hanging below the chassis.
It could also be just availability of what they could buy. Like I know Chris said a lot of they use that 0.5 M for the gear pitch just because it's close enough. So maybe that's just like what they can source. Maybe they can't go exotic.
Well, yeah.
I did the thing with it that Chris did, that calculator or that formula. I went through that, changed it, and I couldn't tell the difference between the optimum gear and a different gear of the same ratio.
Well, he mentioned that
I'm sure he's right
in either direction. Yeah, he said you know, 3 to 4 teeth. I think he said in either direction is typically fine. I may be over speaking that as far as the 4, but I was just kind of curious. You know, why not the same gear size?
Well,
gear
for a
ratios?
starter, I think if you were to take a regular M50 pitch gear, you make a crown gear for inline out of a 50 pitch gear, you get a gear that's about 14 millimeters or 15 millimeters in diameter. Now, if you make that same 27 tooth in the same pitch for a Sidewinder gear, it's too small to fit on this inner Sidewinder, and because the axle gets in the way of the back of the magnet of the back of the motor. So there's a spacing problem when you come to Sidewinders that you don't have with inlines, and that's part of why people use angle winders. So you'll notice that the angle winder pinions and gears, the angle winder gears are usually smaller than the Sidewinder gears in tooth numbers, right? Because, I mean, if you wanted to run a 927 and you wanted it in proper pitch, you know, the gear is going to be maybe 15 millimeter diameter. And if that's the case, you're going to have like about a 9 millimeter diameter pinion. And if you try to put 9 teeth on a 9 millimeter diameter pinion, it's not going to mesh with a 36. With a 27 tooth
that makes sense. Because that makes sense. Its
way too the blank is way too big. So the possibility of getting the things to mesh is you're getting to a point where it's just not possible.
Brian, I've got an answer for you on your gear ratio.
Sure.
The rollout. I did this. My screen's going crazy. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Okay, see the 923 here gives you an overall rollout with an 18.1 millimeter diameter tire of 0.141. And so that's the rollout. If you go to a 924 with the same diameter tire, roughly the same rollout. And then if you go to a 923, you get the rollout back. So what I found, what all this means is about, and this is really not precise at all, but about a 0.5 millimeter in diameter equals 1 tooth on the spur gear.
Okay. That's an empirical rule, I guess. Great.
So that's now, just really rough estimation, because I'm not so anal that I'm going to have to measure it down to the thousandth of an inch in rollout.
Yeah, I got
that you. Gives me an idea what I'm doing with a rollout.
How are you measuring rollout?
It's
are
the
you
number
doing one rotation of the pinion.
I forget how I did it, but it's
rollout is the how far the car would travel on one revolution of the motor.
And my numbers may not be that.
You would use the pinion in that case,
but they relate to that.
Well,
okay. Thank you. Thank you for almost giving me an answer on some of that stuff and good answers on the other stuff.
So, but basically what I found out is that really rough measurements, a half a millimeter in the tire diameter is about 1 tooth on the spur gear. So I know what ballpark I'm in when I change the tire diameter, how far I need to go before I need to change the gears to match it.
A good.
Yes. Yeah. And well, that's kind of what I'm thinking. I'm if I'm trying to build the same car, 4 of them, a lot of times I'm using parts I have on hand, or I saw these wheels at Professional Motor. I thought they were a great price. I tried some. I really liked them. I bought some more. And then it's like, all of a sudden, wow, do I really want this big a wheel? Well, I can compensate with tire, but I already bought the tires for it too. So now what can I do to make this work? It's like the Sidewinder Garth helped me with. The only thing I had on hand for a spur gear was a 13 tooth. So the car is currently running a 1332 setup on my track. It's reminiscent of Revels, if you will, as far as it's still gaining speed by the time it gets to the end of the straightaway. So,
well, the other thing to think about doing what I did with that and worrying about rollout and that minuscule change in gear ratio, I'm looking for 3 or 4 hundredths of a second in lap time.
I get that, and again, a lot of mine was just plain old feel.
Yeah, in
the Predator is wickedly fast, but it's a whole different drive because of the lack of brakes. So I was kind of stunned that the change in tire diameter was as drastic as it was. When I say drastic, was easily noticeable when I drove the car again just with a 1 millimeter smaller tire. It was kind of like, wow, I never paid that much attention to rollout before, and maybe I need to. So in this case, like I said, I put them back on, and I made another pod with a 1 millimeter offset, so I kept the car nice and low. You got to adjust your driving style a little bit, but the car's a beast. It runs bare chassis. It runs right along. Actually, bare chassis, the new NSR Sidewinder Corvettes I have can't keep up. Now, granted, that's sans body, but still, in my mind, for something that a hack like me cobbled together, I'm happy with that. So,
Wayne,
all right, I hogged enough time.
Wayne shared his definitive formula down in the chat there. I'm sure he needs to keep the noise down at the moment, so I don't know if that.
Wow, Dwayne on mute for an entire chat. Is this a landmark? Is this a hallmark moment?
He must be not allowed to wake up his kids.
No. It's a delayed Christmas gift. That's all.
I'm sure he's laughing. All right, well, check out his suggestion, see if that has any help for you, and then maybe text chat with him, or we can go back to that. But let's get Jeremy, see what he's got to talk about.
Hey, I was just wondering, people that are in clubs this time of year, you may be looking at rules. How do you guys go about when you have like a rules club that doesn't have a czar where you have to vote? Do you guys enjoy getting together for the vote? Do you guys do it by mail? Do you guys do it by video chat like this? I was just curious because we've always just gotten together once a year, and I always hate for people to drive for an hour just to, fight about rules. But I just wondered how people out there do it.
Well, for my club, the Analog Club, we do a rules review the first race of the new year. So we've not been keeping to that necessarily, but that's in the rule book is to have a rules meeting. But we usually combine it with some kind of racing, so it's not just nothing but talking about the rules. And although we have a rules chairman, that's basically just somebody to pass the buck to if something comes up regarding the rules during the year, and for him to make a temporary ruling on. And then when we have the annual meeting, we basically read through the rules, and if anybody has any suggestions for changes or objections or whatever, or maybe they've been holding on to something that they've been wanting to change about the rules for the last year or so, then they, this is the time that they bring it up and they talk about it, and we weigh the pros and cons as a group, and we vote on it as a group, whether we want to make that change or not. And then, we make that change or not. It's been, the club is, 20 plus years, maybe more. I wasn't there when it started. So at this point, we've gotten the rules pretty much down to not needing to be changed, because we're fairly flexible on a lot of things to begin with. But yeah, we'll get a bunch of pizza and make it as enjoyable an experience as possible, and then some racing afterwards, or test and tune or whatever afterwards. But yeah, we do it in person.
I can tell you, for the Far Out Slot Car Club, they sent out a survey towards the end of the year, and we go through the survey, and it's pretty extensive, and going through likes and dislikes, and with lots of comments coming in, and then it's all summarized and everything. And then we have our very last race, which was last weekend, I think it was. It's a team race, and so at the team race, after the team race, they spent another hour or so discussing potential changes and getting the feedback and making decisions from that. Unfortunately, I missed that, so I didn't really get to experience it firsthand, but I got the results of it. And I know that we raised our dues from $10 to $15, so I know that's part of it. It was part of the discussion, and there were no class changes or anything. That the survey kind of gives people their input on making changes in the different classes, and your feeling of all the different classes, how you rank them, and things like that.
One of the things I forgot to mention about our rules is that we have rules about who can vote, who can nominate new cars for the series throughout the year, who has a vote at the annual meeting for changes to things. And it's basically, people have to be an active participant of the club for a set amount of time. I think it's like at least half the races for nominating a car, and at least 6 months, relatively continuous participation in order to have any kind of say at the annual meeting. And that's basically because there was a split, and the split was basically created by part of the previous club bringing in a bunch of new racers in order to influence the decisions made at the annual meeting. And
a coup.
A coup, basically, yeah. And in this case, that rule had already been established to prevent that sort of thing. So it was 6+ months of these guys who basically just came to race in order to be there at the annual meeting to, add their votes to the 2 or 3 guys that wanted to make a complete overhaul of the group, basically, of the club and how the club runs, in order to make it a they wanted control over pretty much everything. So they did whatever they could within the rules, bending some of the rules, like declaring an emergency meeting on a day they knew that one of the longest standing members could not be there. The list goes on. Anyways, that's
just
why
like real racing.
What was that?
Just like real racing.
Yeah. So, those are some of the rules, to think about in a club if you haven't already gotten rules like that.
It sounds more like the Senate.
You know what? It was not a good time, but that's why we split and made a whole new group. The guys who wanted to keep it the way it was, the guys who wanted to tell everybody how to do it. But yeah, Jim, what would you like to share?
First thing is in the chat, it seems like I can do this. I uploaded the gear ratio calculator that I showed in both Windows and Mac versions. I assume it seems like it uploaded, so I guess I can do that. Yep. You just on the top line, it has pinion, crown / spur, and tire diameter. So if you want to change one, it automatically calculates, so it's in a spreadsheet. Mm-hmm. So that's up there. Our clubs, we have a couple different factions in Northern California. We have the Sacramento group, we have the NorCal group, and then we have the commercial track group. And we just try to figure out rules that will work, because in the NorCal group, it's individual track owners and they set their rules. Fortunately, they've kind of agreed in the last year or so. And so it's pretty common rules, and the commercial track rules are pretty much the same, and the SAC group rules are somewhat similar, but we've had some issues with that. So when we try to play together, sometimes there've been some issues, but so it's track owners kind of set the rules. We don't have a formal organization other than in name, NorCal. So bottom line, it's set by the track owners.
Yeah, and there's some differences in how the track owners run their races in our club too. Like Russ likes the races with the fuel in longer heats and marshalling, whereas most of the other races are shorter heats with crash and burn and all that. So we have allowances for that kind of thing too. All right, Garth, what you got?
I got a kind of a show and ask. Okay, I had my buddy Jeremy fire up his laser machine and make me something. Okay, let's see if I can show it here. This is what it looks like. Okay, and I don't have one of those fancy dancy surface setup blocks. So, but I do like to when I'm working on a car, I like to set it up. And so what I wanted was I wanted something that was higher off of the bench. Okay, and so I kind of goofed around in CAD and I came up with this design, which is basically 4 inches high and the size of a slot car with a flat top on it. Okay, and so that when I'm sitting at my workbench, I got this thing out in front of me and it's not so I don't have the car or the chassis or whatever I'm working on way down on the table. It's closer up to my eyesight. Okay, and so this was the kind of the first flush of it. Okay, and basically it's just a laser cut thing that's made out of, it's got a top piece and 2 side pieces and 2 end pieces. Okay, and you just kind of push it together, glue it together. Okay, that's what it looks like. And then there's a couple of different, let me go back here a little bit. I'll show you what that's what Jeremy's first shot of it was. So he made it out of 3mm MDF. Okay, and it's perfect for me, so that's kind of the first version of it. And so that begs the question, is anybody kind of interested in this type of a thing? Okay, all right. And so we were pontificating back and forth about whether anybody would want that or want something similar to that. And so we came up with the idea of maybe making versions of it that had some holders on the side. Like this one here is designed to fit a slot car corner 1/24th plate. Okay, and the idea is that you could use it just as a regular top, or you could put your regular aluminum plate down onto the inside of that, and just to encapsulate it so that you got it sitting on your bench. And then the other version of it was something like this, and this is based on the slot car corner 1/32nd plate, which is the same thickness, but it's different in its width and its length. Okay, and this has got a couple things. We came up with this idea of doing that. Okay, and so the show in question is, does anybody think this is a good idea, or is it something that anybody would want? Okay, and that we could design and throw onto the Jaded Parts website. Okay, for a nominal amount of money. So does anybody got?
I like it.
I like the idea for sure, because whenever I'm working on a car, I don't have a sit stand desk, so I'm usually sitting and then hunched over whatever or I have the plate and I do that.
Yeah,
and the car's down low.
Really, the idea came up completely for me. Okay, because I wanted something that I could put on my bench and throw a car on, and it was reasonably flat. And also, and Mike Maurer and I were talking about this, and Mike likes to do something that I like to do, which is once I've got a car set up, sort of, I want to put it on a track, okay? So I can take, and I have Carrera, so I can take a piece of Carrera track and put it on top of the stand, okay? And so that led to the idea of, well, gee whiz, a lot of people have setup blocks, okay? What if we make it so that you could use it by itself, or you could use it with a setup block, or you could put your setup block in it and just have holders to hold the setup block so the setup block wouldn't slide, okay? Not necessarily tightening it down, okay? And so.
And maybe you need to make something that spins as well.
Yeah.
So that you can work on the car and then just turn it.
Yes.
Often, especially if you're soldering things like that, you might want to have it in facing one direction to solder one side, turn it around to solder the other side, or have it one way if you're putting braids in, and the other way around if you're working on the motor. Yeah. Depending how well-handed you are or how ambidextrous you are, you might want to have it in different orientations a lot.
Yeah, that's a good idea. And Dennis, I absolutely thought of the same thing, and I will have something similar on mine where I set it down where I can move it back and forth a little bit like this and that. But the kind of the idea for laser cutting it was to make the shipping really cheap.
Yeah.
And Jeremy already makes the Harbor Freight shelf thing, okay, that he puts into a package and he can ship it for X amount of dollars. And that was kind of the motivation behind having it available to other people, was okay, we can fold it apart, okay, and we make it in a kind of and very much the same exact thing that Racetrack Scenics or Magnetic Racing, guys are making the scenery things, okay, this is more of a working surface.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay. All right, thanks. Anybody got any?
So I was the naysayer on it because I think I just pick up my aluminum block and I just turn it and put it back down. But
I mean,
Gio's like,
just for checking the the stance and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can see that as being kind of a a riser for working on it more ergonomically.
Like I said, it was I wanted it, and he printed it for me, so all I got to do is get him to ship it to me now.
So here's what you do: you make a little video about how that benefits you to have this thing. Boom, marketing.
You just got to find somebody that can do videos.
Well, Jeremy's got that. If you guys want to see something cool, if you go on the Jaded Parts website, this is a cheap. What do you call it? Cheap advertisement.
You might have missed it. We covered it earlier.
But he's got a thing where he calls it an old YouTube thing that he does. That's called Slot. What is it called, Jeremy? Slot Car.
Well, it was called Slot Car Cast, but this was like 15 years ago when YouTube was just starting up.
Yeah.
And I didn't do anything with it, but I held on to the domain name.
And what's the name of it again? But Slot Car
Cast.
Podcast.
Slot Car Cast.
Yeah,
podcasting was just getting
Slot
started.
Car Cast. It's really quite cool. And he did one on the latest guide, okay, that he's got, okay. And it's like a three, you open it up and it's got 3 camera angles, and he's showing his hands working on the chassis, and then he's got a 3D image of it on one side of the screen, and then and it's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool way of showing people, well, this is what it is, and you got 3 different version screens going at one.
You're asking Jeremy to do one of those for your podium.
No, I'm not, because Jeremy's doing so much shit already. Okay, he doesn't have the time to do it, but he did do a nice version of it. Okay, and I, if I ask him to do any more, he's going to kill me. So
probably always.
I like the idea of it, Garth, because it effectively gives you a 2-tier workbench. I mean, you can extend it out to the size if you want to, depending on your own personal preferences. I'd say underneath handy little storage areas for the tools and things that you might need for that particular project. So yeah, I'm hoping it'll be a winner.
Yeah, I toyed around with the size of it, okay. And at first I wanted it to be 6 inches high, you know, because I was sitting at the bench and I went, okay, I would really like it to be like right here. And this is kind of like the you know, the motivation behind it was a piece of Carrera Trax sitting on a cardboard box, you know. Okay, I want to replace my cardboard box with a, you know, a laser cut, you know, surface plate or whatever, you know. So and then I narrowed it down. I cut it down from 6 inches down to 4 inches, thinking that, well, 6 inches might be too high for most people, or the way that you package it up, you know, and you know, because it's designed so that it just folds. You just, you know, put it together. And Jeremy, did you glue it together? I don't even know. Okay,
I didn't glue it together. I got yours
you could
ready.
actually use it, just push together, you know.
Yeah, you just press fit it if you want, but you can glue it.
You know,
for me, that it would be more like an organizer. Like your tool, your Allen wrench is always here. Your screwdriver is always here. Now, if I'm working on a car, the chassis is always here. It's not, well, I'll grab something and I'll put the chassis over here, then I'll grab something else and put the chassis over there. The chassis is right in the same place all the time. So to me, it would be as an organizer.
So you're saying it's a good idea. It's a good idea. Is that what you're saying?
I think so.
Okay.
What do you got to lose?
Yeah.
If you want a bigger one, you want a bigger one, you buy two of them and put them side by side.
Well, what we were going to try to do was look at all of the popular aluminum plates, okay, so that we could figure out, okay, what size do we make it so that it's still shippable, okay, yet maybe it would lend itself to all of the different plates that are out there. You know, there's two of them for slot car corner and precision slot cars, and this one and that one, you know, kind of take a survey of all of them and then come up with something that would at least be usable to everybody here. You know, and seriously, if you just had it right on sitting on top of it, that probably would be good as well.
For my part, I'm thinking along the lines of Jim with the, you know, places for screwdrivers and stuff like that I'm using it. But I'm envisioning a column of cleanliness holding my car and tools, and down on my table, surrounded.
Oh, so just holes around the top where you put screwdrivers in and just have
all the junk, all the tires and wheels and screws and things all over my workbench.
You know what?
Like Geo, except worse. Even messier than that. That's clean. That's clean compared to my workbench.
I cannot find shit, man. I mean, it's everything like 1 square inch. I can work here. I know where this stuff is over there.
Maybe it's two products now. I'm glad you guys are harping in on it, because maybe it's the surface plate, the tuning surface plate, and then a base that spins. You know, and so you know what I'm saying? You could buy one or buy both. You know, and,
or add a battery and some sandpaper, and you'll get something like this.
Yeah.
It's a tire truing machine.
Exactly. Yes. Circa 1842.
How much are those? Like $99.95?
Only if you act now. Only if you act now.
It's funny that you mentioned that.
You could put that up on the surface plate, you know.
I started to do a laser cut. I don't know if you can see it, where I was going to put braids in here and have it adjust, and so you could have a little run-in bench here. I think that's kind of where Garth, then he got his idea. He kind of just started spitballing ideas, but
no, actually, no, not at all.
Well, you also don't forget the cup holder. You need a cup holder.
A cup holder.
No, you know, maybe
you're gonna need LED lights also.
Or
don't
in the Canadian case, a bottle holder, right?
A camera.
Yep, gonna need a camera.
Heating element for the aluminum.
This is like
have sound.
Hold on, this is like Homer Simpson designing a car. This is gonna be so bad.
It's gonna be the Pontiac Aztec of.
It's gonna look like a camel.
Yep.
I'm sorry I brought it up.
Garth can't get a word in edgewise.
No, but yeah, just keep iterating.
Keep iterating, yeah.
And
Just for
share, and
kitchen
share it.
vehicles,
I mean, honestly, if the only changes that were made to what you showed was a few holes big enough for your typical screwdrivers and various hex drivers and stuff.
Yeah.
And I know Garth is going to want to call it the CUDA.
Of course, it's the Garth CUDA. It's the Garth.
Does anybody use the measurements that are on like the slot car corner one? You know, they have like millimeters and inches. I never used it, and I was thinking, as I got to thinking about it, I was like, does anybody ever?
I don't know.
I don't either. Okay.
The inspiration, and Dennis will be the only one here that will get this. Okay, the inspiration was a cast surface plate. Okay, where they, it's got the sides are curved in. Okay, and then the top is ground. Okay, and that's kind of where it came from. Okay?
Ground or scraped until it's flat.
Yeah, exactly. So.
You remember those old surface plates where they used to scrape them? They had the people sitting there, and they would lower a plate down and with jeweler's rouge or marker of some sort on it, and then the guys would sit and scrape and scrape and scrape. They get those things flat within half a thousandth of an inch by the time they're done.
Yeah. Yep. That was the generalized idea was a cast surface plate. So only for slot cars.
Yeah.
All right. Any last comments on that? I think we're
I like it. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. I actually do too. We were giving you guys some shit about it. Like I said, iterate and Wayne said someone will buy it.
And as far as height is concerned, I think most standard tabletops are about 29, 30 inches high. So if you're sitting in a regular seat, you want to bring it up close to your eye level. Start calculating.
Yeah.
How tall you want.
How tall was that one that you were showing?
So, John, you think high would be better than
Yeah, I don't think you want it too high. You're going to knock it over.
Yeah. Well, yes, that's correct. Okay.
3 to 4 inches would be the maximum, I would think.
Okay, so I wasn't too far off then, you're saying.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me is now and then when you're working on something, if it's particularly delicate, you may want to rest your hands on the bench, and then holding the tool you want to do whatever you're doing. Then if it's 4 inches up in the air, your hands are in the air, and you may not have quite the control that let me rephrase that. I know I will not have the control anymore.
If you make the base slightly trapezoidal, the bigger at the bottom.
Yeah, that'll help.
Then definitely don't do this, but if you do this, even just slightly, will make it a lot less prone to.
Make it so you can slip a standard size brick or two in the bottom.
And I was thinking about a couple or two. No, it's all by itself, isn't it, Jeremy? Now, I mean, it's just a rectangle, right? So.
Yeah, it's just a rectangle.
Yeah.
I've got my cell phone sitting on top of a Coke can. It seems to be an ideal height.
There you go.
All right. On that note, I'm going to hit the end stream button. And as always, everybody, bye. Until next week, everybody say bye.
Yes.
And a happy